Okay, this one's a little late. I've been wanting to do this one for a little while, and the thing is, I didn't get to see X-Men Dark Phoenix, which I think is just called Dark Phoenix, in the theater. I had to kind of wait for it, and I saw it. And the thing that prevented me from seeing it in the theater is that I heard reviews were terrible. Like, everyone was shitting on this movie. I heard it was amazingly bad. And then I actually looked at I think it was Rotten Tomatoes, where the reviewer score was very low, but the audience score wasn't terrible. It wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. And then I heard some people saying, "Yeah, it's pretty good. It's okay. It's not great, but it's not bad." And I'm like getting really mixed messages on this. So I had to go see this thing myself. I saw it myself, and I don't see what the hullabaloo was about. It was actually pretty good. It wasn't great. I wouldn't give it an A. Give it a low B if I were inclined to give things grades. Maybe even a C+. Somewhere around that neighborhood. It's not terrible. But I do see, I've heard there was a lot of trouble behind the scenes. I've heard that there were a lot of reshoots, expensive reshoots, on a show that did not need it. And that's sort of what killed it. I bring this up every once in a while because the economics of movie making is interesting to me and kind of fascinating. For a normal film, how does this go? Normally, if they say they spend like $100 million on a movie, they haven't spent $100 million on the movie. They've spent almost twice that, with the additional money being mostly for advertising and promotion. And for that matter, when we talk about the return on it, like how much did they get for making this? What was the box office return? You have to realize that's a gross. That the actual theaters themselves are getting like half of that, a little over half in the US. I think it's like 60% in the US, 50% in a lot of countries overseas, and in places like China, it's only 1/4. So, depending on where it did the best, it made different amounts of money, which, if the studio doesn't really advertise how much they spent, the extra money they spend, and it's really hard to determine, to nail down really how much they actually made from making a movie, it's hard to say how well a film does or how poorly it does. Like I said, the economics of it is interesting to me for that reason. Generally, if you take a movie and you multiply its budget by 3, that's around where its break-even point is going to go, and at 4 times its original budget, that's where it's made enough money to be successful. Most of the time. For very large budget films and very small budget films, those numbers just fall apart. Doesn't always work. So this movie cost $200 million to make. That's more than most Marvel films. And its special effects were fine, but not $200 million fine. And its box office return was 262.4. I think it's not in the theaters anymore. I think it just stopped because this was from June and it's now August. I think it was done in the theaters quite early. This movie lost a lot of money. So its break-even point was $600 million. It was never going to get close to that. I point this out simply because for a lot of these films, if they had had a more constrained budget, if they had been less ambitious or less shit had gone wrong while they were making it, they would have done okay, if not well. Like the Ghostbusters 2016 lost an estimated $125 million, making it one of the box office losingest films in history. If it had been made on $75 million, I think 72, 75 million, somewhere in that neighborhood, it would have done well enough that it could have had a sequel. Sequel would have already been out. Instead, it was made on 144, but they also way overspent on promotion, which is crazy because they spent... that's a whole another video for another time. Anyway, my point being, they overspent on this film. The effects, you've seen the makeup in the videos. Mystique looks like cheap Mystique makeup. A lot of the characters disappear in the film, like they're barely in it. If you're waiting for the cool Quicksilver scene vis-a-vis the first time he appears in, what was the second one? The second reboot, second soft reboot. How did they fight in that one? Oh, the Sentinels one. The Future Past, where the amazing Quicksilver scenes, which came sort of, I thought was expected to be like what we were going to see. A hallmark of this series was just Quicksilver's going to do something amazing at least once per movie. Doesn't really happen. He's not even in most of it. Which is true for most of these characters, unfortunately. I think they had to completely redo their bad guys, so their bad guys are just shape changers who look like people. Things like that. I thought it was cool. I enjoyed it, but very clearly they had to redo and retool a lot of stuff. So they spent a fortune on a movie that looks like it was under a lot of budget constraints. And that's never good. That said, the story's fine. It's interesting enough. I like the thing. I'm not going to spoil it, I guess. People could still see it on video on demand. But the train scene at the end, the big action set piece at the very end, is very cool. I like the acting. James McAvoy is always awesome. Everyone is always awesome in this as well. I think, what is her name? Jennifer Lawrence. She phoned it in. She really did. She clearly did not want to be in this film. I don't think she wanted to be in the last one either. But this one, I thought she could not get off the set fast enough. Otherwise, everyone else was excellent. Absolutely everyone else. What are the odds you'd see this and not like it? Pretty good, actually. But not terrible. In retrospect, I'd say 1 in 3 people are going to have a problem with this because it does look like a low-budget film. A lot of their favorite characters are barely in it, if they're in it at all. A lot of the scenes, the cool stuff that you're looking for is abbreviated or missing. And stuff is at a forced, fast pace. This is a long, drawn-out story, the story of the Dark Phoenix, crunching it into a movie that, God, that movie wasn't even 2 hours long. It was 114 minutes. It felt shorter, which is odd. Better that than it feels too long, I suppose. But I think there's a 1 in 3 chance you'll have some issues here. Do I want to see it again? Not really. It was hardly the dramatic swan song that the soft rebooted X-Men deserved, but it wasn't terrible. It wasn't the worst note to leave off on, as opposed to prior to the reboot, the last Dark Phoenix movie, which was just fucking awful. I didn't think it was a total waste of time. It was an okay film, which nowadays, where people's expectations are so high, I realize that's not what people want. They want to be wowed more than the last film and more than the film before that and so on. So going back a few steps and being okay isn't the best way to go. That's not gonna give you a good impression. That said, I liked it more than Apocalypse, which had more dramatic moments in it and better effects. I don't know. I just wanted to comment on that because like I said, I dug it. I thought it was fine. It wasn't amazing, but it was pretty good. Anyway, that's me.